Hey everybody, welcome to StadiaCast. This is basically episode 1. If you heard the other episode, that was episode 0. I'm Bill, and I'm joined by my co-host, Lloyd. How's it going, Lloyd?
It is going pretty awesomely, Bill. I'm so excited about this. I'm so excited about the Stadia. It's going to be an interesting year in video gaming.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said interesting, because right now we have no idea if this is going to be good or if it's going to be bad. I mean, it could go either direction. But before we get into that, I want to just take a second because, and in the future, everybody, we're not going to do this. We're just going to jump right in and talk about the latest Stadia news. But I figured we would introduce ourselves to anybody who doesn't listen to our other shows. So why don't you start us off, man?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Lloyd Hannison. I'm Dasme on Twitter, DASME. And I host a number of podcasts. I actually run the podcast network Res TV, REZD.TV. I've been podcasting since 2005, started way back with the PSP podcast back in the day. And it's carried over to my Nintendo show, Nintendo Pulse, which I've been doing since 2006. And just been basically covering the games industry for a very long time as a hobby. I ran a gaming news site for many years, I'm just I'm a lover of video games. I play them every day, and the Stadia was something enough to kind of, I don't know, maybe get my excitement level up again, which I haven't had in a while since maybe the Nintendo Switch was announced. So I'm eager to start talking about this thing.
Yeah. And I'm Bill. I'm the host of Nintendo Switchcraft, and you can find all my stuff over at runjumpstomp.com. So that's actually how Lloyd and I met, was doing Nintendo shows. He's been on my show, I've been on his show, and we've talked about all kinds of stuff before. And exactly what he said about like Stadia, we looked at that and we were like, man, that is really, really interesting. And I was recording my Nintendo show, and I was talking about, like, I had just wrapped up the show, and I was talking about that I was doing this show, StadiaCast, and Lloyd was like, oh, Bill, you beat me to it. And I said, hey, man, 2 heads are better than 1. Why don't you join me on this? So he said yes. I put him on the spot, and here we are recording episode 1. So for those of you who, I can't imagine anybody who's listening to this doesn't know what Stadia is. But Lloyd, can you give them like the elevator pitch?
Sure. Yeah. So Stadia is Google's first official foray into the gaming world. They did a test back in the, fall of 2018 called Project Stream, where they basically were having a bunch of people could sign up for the beta. You could play Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and how you played it was in Google Chrome. And you would hook up a controller to it and play games that way. And they were saying that this is something that they're working on. We're not sure what we're going to do with it, yada, yada, yada. And fast forward to this week when they unveiled Stadia, which we don't really know fully what it is. We can make some educated guesses. But what Stadia is, it's a hardware/software combo. Google worked with all the industry leaders to make these new server blades, which basically have these really fast GPUs. And what they're going to be doing is running games in the cloud, and they're going to be streaming to you. So we don't know yet whether you own the games, whether you're paying for a service, whether it's going to be a combination of both. We don't know those specifics, but essentially you're going to be using a web browser and a controller in your hand to play a video game. And these aren't like Flash games from like Congregate. These are the latest and greatest best games, and they will actually have the potential to look better than anything that a modern console can look. So it's a server-based video game playing thing, which will take shape over the coming months until they officially unveil it.
Yeah, so like Lloyd was saying, the idea that these could possibly look better than anything is basically because you don't have to have, you don't have to have any hardware.
That's right.
And that's kind of what I'm really excited about, is I don't have to buy extra stuff to try this. And there's so many things about Stadia that it could portend something completely different. So Lloyd was saying that you don't have, or how do I want to say that? He was saying that it could look better than anything. That's because they were saying a single server blade of this would have more teraflops, which if you've ever listened to any of my other stuff, I always say, I don't really care about numbers. But it would have more teraflops than an Xbox One X and a PS4 Pro put together. And games can run on multiple GPUs at the same time.
And that was
just
the thing.
one is, what's that?
I said, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That was the thing that perked my ears up, because they said it's faster than this and this. I'm like, do you know what would be really cool? If you could combine multiple blades, and they're like, you can run a game on multiple blades. And it's like, oh my God, because they were talking during the presentation that by default at launch, you're going to be able to play 4K games at 60 frames a second. But they're like, yeah, we're going to support 8K games and all this. And I'm like, how are they going to do that without coming up with new hardware in the back end? Well, this is how they're going to do it. They're just going to chain multiple blades together, which is just, it's a genius way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember back in the days of the PS3, when that first launched, and Sony was kind of bragging about like their cell technology, and me not really reading enough into it, misunderstood what they meant. And what I thought that they meant that they were going to do is use the internet to connect PS3s that are not being used to help do the processing power of your PS3 when you were playing it. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so that's just because I didn't own a PS3, so I didn't pay close enough attention. And I like the way they described their cell technology. It kind of sold me. A little naive on my part, but that's okay. But this seems almost like that's exactly what's happening, except it's not in anybody's house. It's at Google's house.
That's right. Yeah, it's more like what Microsoft was promising with the Xbox One, when they said, yeah, you're going to have all your games running in the cloud. We're going to do cloud AI. And they talked about Crackdown. You'd be able to shoot out the foundation of a building. The building would come crashing down, and all the physics are running in the cloud. And that never happened because of they were a little bit ahead of their time. Well, now everything's taking place in the cloud. You have no local CPU in your house or in your hand that is running the game. All you're doing is receiving a YouTube video, essentially, which basically means that you can play these games on whatever you have around you, whether it's a $200 Chromebook laptop, whether it's a $5,000 gaming PC. It doesn't really matter, because it doesn't matter what you're playing it on. And for me, looking forward, that means I could play a game on my PC that I stream on, but that means that I have an older MacBook, and I could play the same game on that MacBook, really taking hardware out of the equation, which is going to be huge, provided you have enough network bandwidth that is going to make this streaming possible.
Well, you also have to remember, you mentioned the network bandwidth. I know that a lot of people who are responding to Google's announcement of Stadia with some skepticism. And I always think skepticism is healthy and a good thing, and we should definitely be skeptical that they can actually pull this off.
Definitely.
But a lot of people are saying, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to, on my internet connection, I'm not going to be able to do 4K 60 frames per second with HDR. That's insane. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, but you don't have to stream that high. They said that it supports up to that amount. Exactly. So if you have slower speeds, it, from what I understand, should automatically ramp down, kind of like what YouTube does automatically. So if I sit down and I go to watch YouTube and I have a bad internet connection, it shows it to me at 460p or whatever. And, if I sit down and I've got the internet that I actually have at my house, which is pretty damn good, then it's, it ramps up to source, which is whatever they decided to film it at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm a lifelong gamer. I love gaming rather. I love tech. I love everything. I don't have a 4K screen in my house. I have monitors that are 2K, but that's about as high as my resolution gets. So I don't have to stream 4K. And it's going to be the same for a lot of people. They might be using their phone or a tablet or maybe a Switch in the future or some other device that has a lower resolution screen. Well, then you don't need like 50 megabit or 500 megabit internet. You just need something that can do like basic DSL would probably be able to play these games at 1080p or 720p. So yeah, there's a lot of FUD out there. There's a lot of people panicking, but we don't really even know what the minimum specs are, what the minimum kind of stream speeds that you need are. They haven't gone into those details. But yeah, like it's going to essentially run like YouTube runs. So if you can watch YouTube videos and they look decent, your games are going to look decent as well.
Right. And I'm sure that we're going to see some artifacting. And if you don't know what artifacting is, it's when you're watching a video and some little block shows up or whatever. But if the game's playable and you don't have to buy hardware, then I think that's a pretty good trade-off. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there right now who are hating on this. And then there's people like Lloyd and I who are excited for it. But I don't want anybody to think that we're going to be cheerleaders for this. We're definitely skeptical. Like, I wonder if it's going to work. I look at the long play and I say, you know, everybody said nobody would use an iPad. Everybody said that playing games, that you would never be able to do like massively multiplayer games. You know, everything that people have done has always come with previous to that, people saying that'll never work.
Yep.
And then it works. Somebody figures it out. And I think that this, whether it's Microsoft doing it with their streaming service or Google doing it with their streaming service, this is inevitable. Maybe not now. Maybe when Google tries to do this and it launches this year, maybe when they try to do this, it's a horrible failure. But I think that this is the future of gaming. And this is something that is inevitable. We will eventually get there, whether we want to or not. And there's definitely other reasons why you might want to wonder, maybe we don't want this to happen.
Yep. Yeah, very true. And there's going to be people that are going to be holdouts. We've already seen a sea change over across a number of industries. We saw music go from CDs to MP3s. We saw video go from VHS tapes and DVDs to Netflix. And even before Netflix, there was renting your discs by mail, and then it turned into Netflix and streaming. We've seen digital downloads for video games for the last couple of generations. If anybody out here listening to this knows me, you know that I have behind me when I do my video podcasts, there's NES boxes and Super Nintendo boxes and Switch cases. So I love physical media when it comes to video games. But on the PC, I also use Steam, and I don't have a lot of boxes for my Steam games. In fact, I have 0 boxes for my Steam games. So for playing PC games, I've already made that switch to digital. So not owning a physical chunk of something doesn't really bother me. You have games on your iPhone, you have games on your Android phone. You don't own a physical box you put on your shelf. So this is kind of the way the industry is going, and it's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen in June at E3. It's going to take years, maybe even a generation of new gamers coming up. Like my kids will probably not know what physical media is for the next generation. They know Switch, they know this, but if Stadia is kind of what they're playing future games on, they're not even going to blink because they don't know what media is. You ask a kid what's a CD or what an LP is, they don't even know. They look at you with like a confused expression. And and in our lifetime, we've seen physical media for music and movies almost completely disappear. Of course, there's the holdouts that buy vinyl and all that stuff, and that's them. They can do that. But then there's people like me where I don't want to buy new hardware every year. I just want to play the latest and greatest games without having to shell out all this money for hardware. This either Microsoft or Stadia is going to be perfect for that, because you can just play the latest and greatest, and who cares what it's running on? Google or Microsoft can pay for those servers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Although, you know, we talk about not wanting to buy hardware year after year after year because, you know, they keep updating and coming out with the new thing that can do the cool stuff. We don't know what Google is going to be charging for Stadia.
Exactly.
We don't know what their monetization model is. It could just be a store where Google is saying, we'll take X% of every sale, and you just sell your stuff, and we'll just run the servers, and we'll probably run ads what, like when you turn on your Stadia thing, it'll probably have ads along the bottom or something, but then you go into a game and maybe those go away. Or it could be a subscription service where you have to pay each month or maybe every year for access to Stadia, and then you have to buy the games on top of it. Or it could be something like the what's the Xbox one where you pay and you get access to the newest games?
Yeah, the Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah, Game Pass. It could be something like Xbox Game Pass. And I know that there's a lot of people out there just saying, oh my God, another subscription. And I am with you. There's too many subscriptions out there right now. I think a lot of people have subscription fatigue. And I think that if Stadia is going to take off, I really think it needs to start out free. Or, it just occurred to me. I hadn't thought about this before, but what if 1080p 60 is free? And if you want a game at 4K 60, then you pay a subscription.
Sure. Yeah, something like that.
That's another way that they can monetize it.
100%. Something like that could work out. And I talked with some buddies about this, and we're kind of banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out what Google's going to do. And I mean, it's impossible to figure out what Google's going to do because they're kind of a special company that kind of does their own thing. But just like what you said, if there's at least a free level where you can play free-to-play games, you can play your Fortnite, you can play your MOBAs, you can play some older full retail games for free, and those are either they have ads on the videos that you upload or ads during like load screens or something, some way to monetize it that way. I could see this being used by like millions of people with no problem. I do think there's probably going to be multiple tiers, whether it's going to be different subscription tiers or whether it's going to be like a subscription like Xbox Game Pass that gets you access to 400 games or 200 games or whatever that number is. And then if you want to buy Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six 17, you're going to be paying your $60 to get that at launch. And then maybe that'll make its way into that service. So run it similar to what Xbox is doing, where they sell retail games. And some of those retail games from third parties will then make their way into Game Pass down the road.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I'm very, very interested in how Google is going to handle this. So we've kind of laid the groundwork for what Stadia is. We've pointed out the things that we don't know yet. We've talked about how the fact that there's reasons why this could be terrible. There's reasons why it could be great. Let's actually talk about some of the features, because some of the features I think are really, really exciting. Like, for instance, the state share. That's this really cool thing where you're playing a game and like maybe something crazy happens. There's a button on the controller, and we'll definitely talk about the controller before this episode is over. There's a button on the controller called the share button. You can hit that, and it can basically capture that point in the game that it keeps track of what was your health at, where were you standing, which way were you facing, how many enemies were on the board, which way were they facing, how much ammo did you have, or whatever it is for the game that you're playing. And you can say, okay, everybody, I'm going to share this state of my game, and let's see if you can do as good as I did. Mm-hmm. And I just think that is so amazing. This brings streaming and building content, like, because both Lloyd and I are Twitch streamers and content creators. It brings that to a whole nother level, and I'm very excited about that. What did you think about State Share?
Same as you. I was excited about that, and mainly just because of the kind of the Twitch audience that I'm familiar with. Like, you'll be watching a Twitch stream and then they do something ridiculous and everybody clips it, and then you watch the video and it's like, okay, well, this is like clip plus. They hit a button or you hit a button and you jump into the game exactly where they were. The games have to support State Share, of course. It's not built into every game, but this is just another feature that they're going to offer to developers to add into their game, which is really cool. And yeah, and they said that these state links they're just basically YouTube links essentially, and they're going to be shareable like through Twitter or through Discord or wherever you're talking with your friends or your community. So there could be like speedrun games coming out in the future, and you could do like the best run ever, and then you share your state with a friend or the community, and now it'll be like, say, Mario Kart when you're racing, and then you have a ghost come in, which is like the best run of that course. Well, you're essentially doing a ghost run of whatever game that is, or you have the potential to do that. And if this is built into many games going forward, I could see this industry being, or this part of the game industry being huge, of people sharing states and playing states. And it'll be like, I don't know, watching speed runs or whatever. People want to get like the best path through whatever platforming level or racing level or sports game that you have out there. This could be fantastic. The coolest thing about that share button is it does more than just the state share. Like it's configurable by the developer. So you could hit it and you start a live stream for just you, or a live stream for just your friends, or a live stream for the world. So they've really been forward thinking about the hardware, and also adding features to the software that the hardware can kind of hook into.
Yeah, I mean, Google has tripped over their feet over and over and over again with live streaming. Mm-hmm. They tried YouTube gaming, and they've kind of dropped the ball. They wanted to buy Twitch, but Amazon beat them to the punch, or paid more money for it. And I think that this is probably the first time that I'm looking at what YouTube is doing and saying, okay, they're trying to do something new, mm-hmm. rather than just being an also-ran.
Exactly.
And I think that that's really, really interesting. For instance, if you're watching, like, let's say I'm playing a game and I hit that share button, and it captures... You can hit that. You can have that button capture your gameplay. So it doesn't even have to be a live stream. You could just capture your gameplay and post it to your YouTube channel, and then somebody else can be watching it, and then they can just hit play and pick up right where you left off. That's crazy.
Yep.
We're both Twitch streamers. Let's talk about the live streaming thing that they have. This is really weird, because anybody who's a streamer usually has a pretty beefy computer in order to keep everything going, and you can stream from your Chromebook.
Yeah, because it's handled server side, which is just genius. So you're playing a game, you're running on a little tiny Chromebook, but you're the best player at that game for whatever reason. You're using terrible hardware, but it doesn't matter because everything's running back on Google servers. So Google's sending you a 1080p stream to the network. You hit the live stream button, and Google then just kind of like forks off a 4K stream to your YouTube live page. So you're not sending that data. YouTube is just sending the data to multiple places, and that is really the beauty that Google has, because they have data centers all over the world. That's why you go to Google and you type in what are video games, and it comes up in like half a second. Well, because they have servers everywhere, and they know how to get all this networking stuff done. So the ability to live stream without you having to do any of that is fantastic. It's going to be huge. Like, everybody can be a live streamer now. You don't have to have a beefy piece of hardware. Like the last console generation, Xbox and PlayStation, or the current console generation, I guess I keep thinking of the last one because the Switch came out, but the current one with PS4 and Xbox, they have live streaming built into it, but you have to have decent internet to then send that up to the servers. Well, this is just happening server side. You don't even have to worry about that junk.
Right. Well, you still need decent internet in order to play, but you don't have to have the upload speed.
Exactly.
Because it's really all based on your downloads. I was listening to somebody talk about it the other day, and they actually, or yesterday, and they said that the most important part of this was the upload speed. I didn't agree with that. Like, that didn't make any sense to me. Does that make sense to you?
No, like it's latency, but latency isn't controlled by your upload speed. So as long as you have like, say, 3 megabit up, that should be enough, because every packet that your computer receives, you're sending, yep, got it. Yep, got it. Nope, you have to resend that one. You're sending all these little bits of information back at the server. Well, that doesn't take a lot of data compared to what's coming down when you're watching a YouTube video. You can actually go on your computer and watch YouTube and look at your network bandwidth and see, like, your bits coming in is huge and your bits going out is tiny. So having decent upload, you don't even need good upload. You'll be able to send back all your commands from your controller and all that stuff. That won't be impacted at all. But yeah, it's really the download speed to get that like full 1080p or 4K stream coming to you. That's where the download is going to be really, really important.
Now, the one thing that I'm wondering how they're going to, how are they going to get around this is let's say I'm playing a game and I'm live streaming it, maybe from my Chromebook or whatever. Mm-hmm. The thing that I don't understand, and maybe this is just because I'm trapped in the mindset of somebody who streams on Twitch. When I'm playing a game on Twitch, I have a camera and there's a little box where you can see my camera. And then I have overlays so that when somebody tips, there's some kind of crazy thing that happens. If they're just forking the stream that they're sending to me and sending it to YouTube at the same time, then they're not getting my camera.
Correct.
At least I don't think. I mean, because maybe they've got some kind of wizard thing that they have figured out where it just sends my camera and then mixes the two and sends that out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean, Lloyd?
Yeah, I mean, and that could be possible. You could be running the Stadia live stream client. So you load up a different app in whatever web browser or whatever in the Chrome browser on whatever machine you're using. And if you have a camera hooked up, maybe it ties into that. If you have a microphone plugged in, maybe it ties into that. So in the future, that could be something that they could just add to that live stream suite. Maybe they could even partner with, say, Streamlabs, and you could do whatever your Streamlabs overlays would show up in this interface. But the actual game data doesn't have to come from your machine. It would all come from their servers already. They would just fork off another copy of whatever they're sending to you.
Yeah, you know what? I just thought of this is one of the things that I always kind of wanted when I was streaming is for me to be able to see what chat is seeing exactly all the time. So I get to see my game, but with my overlay on it, so I can see myself and all that stuff too. Mm-hmm. Right now, when I stream, I see the game, and they see all this other stuff that I don't really look at. Mm-hmm. I almost wonder if that's something that might be the way that they do it, where you just click a button and it puts it mixes it together, because they talked about this other cool feature about the split screen stuff.
Yeah.
And but before we get to the split screen stuff, because I brought it up, I know I shouldn't have, but I want to go back real quick to one more feature that is very, very important to streaming, and that's crowd play.
It's going to be huge. This is what we've wanted for quite some time. I've wanted, I don't know if you want it, but most streamers would want something like this, where you're playing a game, someone pops in your stream and says, "Hey, I want to play with you." And if you're using the Switch, you have to trade friend codes, or if you're using an Xbox or PS4, you have to do, okay, give me your ID. Okay, there's my ID. I'll invite you to the game. Yada yada yada. In crowdplay basically just allows you to, on your stream, so whether you're streaming from OBS or whether you're streaming using the built-in thing, I would assume, you could enable that I want my community to join me, and then on the video that they're watching of your stream, a button appears and they click join, and then they join this lobby waiting for you to allow them into your game. This is going to be great for things like fighting games and other stuff where you want to have a group of people that you want to play with, and they can just queue up and join your stream. It's going to be huge. It's going to be interesting to see how they're going to do it, though. My envisioning of it is I would be running OBS on my machine, and then I would just have this little Stadia widget where I'd click, crowd play, and it would send out the invite link that would pop up on my YouTube stream. But we don't really know the details, but Google's pretty smart. I would think that it would be something really elegant like that. And yeah, just the ability to have easy play with my viewers or my community. It's super exciting. I'm really looking forward to stuff like that, because doing it now, it's not impossible, but it just has a couple layers of confusion that that makes it just not a really nice experience.
Yeah, it kind of slows you down and takes you out of the moment to moment stuff, and kind of bogs things down. I found it kind of funny that you were referring to, I would be running OBS. I wonder if we'll even need it. Yeah.
They're probably going to allow you to do whatever you want. If you want to stream your web browser using OBS, you can do that. And you can add in all your widgets and your Streamlab tip jars and whatever crazy things you have. Or you can just be someone that just streams right from the Stadia interface, I would assume. And that would it would look more like an Xbox or a PlayStation 4 live stream that has some vanilla kind of overlay with the chat and stuff showing up.
Yeah. Okay, so I said that we would get back to something, but I have the memory of a goldfish. What was it that and I remember now, the split screen thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, this looks so cool. So if you weren't watching, dear listener, first off, what are you doing? You should have gone and watched it. It was cool. They showed, they were making this big deal about how when you're running a game and then you put it into split screen mode, now the machine has to render 2 of everything.
Correct.
So that puts a huge performance hit on everything that you're doing. And like, for instance, the Nintendo Switch, when they unveiled Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch, everybody was like, wow, I can't believe that they are running split screen at 60 frames per second in both. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And split screen really does drop the frame rate because the hardware has more to do. And Google is saying, well, you don't have to worry about that. We'll put that on some other blade. It's basically giving you an extra Stadia. And so if Lloyd and I are playing together, he's playing on his blade, I'm playing on mine, but we can play split screen so we can see what the other person is doing. And then they showed something that got me really excited. They showed some gameplay, and then they had the other players who were playing remotely.
Yep.
They had their screens, like 4 or 5 different screens up on the board, so you could see everybody's point of view.
Totally. Can you imagine playing like a Fortnite or an Apex Legends, and someone calls out an enemy and you just look up to their little icon on the screen and you see their viewpoint. You can see exactly what they're looking at, and then you can pick out, oh, I know where that tree is. Okay, I'm going to come around and I'm going to flank them. It's huge, and as you're saying, like split screen does have a huge performance impact, and actually there's a lot of games that you could never do split screen because of the way the engine loads. So say like Horizon Zero Dawn, it only loads into memory the objects that are in front of you on the screen. So stuff that's behind you, the game doesn't even know about it. Once you start turning your head, it's loading that stuff into memory. So if you had split screen, it wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to have these like huge expansive levels because it only knows what's in front of the main player. Now, if you're doing split screen and it's just firing up another blade or another instance of the game, like, it doesn't matter. You can have as crazy of an engine with as huge of a world as you want because it's just running multiple copies of the game on different pieces of hardware, which, of course, it totally makes sense. But when I was like, how are they going to do split screen there? How are they going to sync the signals between 2 people? I was overthinking it. You just fire up the game in another one, and it's like you're playing. It's like you're playing online with someone else, but it's split screen when you're doing it.
Yeah, that is very exciting. Like, I can definitely imagine we're playing, and here's what I hope that they do. Like, let's say that Apex Legends, which is currently my favorite battle royale, I love that game so much. We'll say we're playing Apex Legends, and Lloyd and I are on a team together, and he says, "There's there's a Octane coming around the corner, Bill." Here, this would be so cool. Is if his little part of the screen that's on my screen, if his little part lit up when he talks, because then I'd be like, oh, okay, I know where to look now. I just think that would be amazing. Let's talk a second about, first off, no games were really announced other than Doom. Mm-hmm. I will say that Doom is a very ambitious game for them to start with because Doom is insanely fast, very, very fast paced game. And you absolutely have to get the latency right. Yep. You have to. Yeah. If you don't get the latency right, it's going to be a very bad experience playing a game like Doom.
And you've seen that with PlayStation Now and other streaming services, Gaikai. When you're playing a game that has fast action, it was unplayable. The latency was just too high. So hopefully Google has this figured out. And I know people that did their Project Stream demo with like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. They said that the latency was not bad at all. So maybe they've figured it out. And Marty from id Software was up there and says, yeah, it works great at 4K 60 frames per second. And it's just like, ooh, really? I don't know, but we'll see. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, but if they're saying it on a big stage at GDC, maybe it really is a thing.
Yeah, and we do have to point out this was a GDC conference. This was not an E3 thing. This was not meant, I mean, yes, it was also meant for us, but this is really aimed at game developers to get them on board. And if I'm a game developer, I don't know what kind of deal they're going to have to make with Google in order to get on this platform. I don't know if it's going to be beneficial to them monetarily or whatever. But if I'm a game developer and I'm looking at this, first off, Stadia, which, by the way, not the best name. I can never remember it. Sounds like a pill you're going to take. Okay.
I heard someone say that it's the plural of stadiums, and I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah, that I understand the reason for it. It's just not a great name.
No, I'm like, well, it's not stadiums. It would be like movie theaters or something else. Like there's a better name for it, but yeah, I don't know. Marketing is tough.
It is tough. But Stadia, this is very powerful. And it supports it supports Unity, it supports Unreal, it supports Havoc, it supports all these middleware stuff that devs already use. Yeah. So porting their games over to this is not going to be labor intensive. It's not like when you port to, and you know, Lloyd and I are both Nintendo guys. It's not like when you port to the Switch where you have to dumb everything down in order to get it to run on this less powerful hardware that is less powerful for a reason, to conserve battery, because it's a portable system.
Right.
This is a more powerful system. Porting to this is going to be so much easier than porting to anything else because it already supports the big engines and all that middleware. I think that we're going to see a lot of games at launch. Yeah. Whenever that is.
And even better, every single person is running the same hardware because it's running in the cloud. So you have one set of specs to code for. And I mean, that's why a lot of console games never make it to the PC, is because instead of developing for Xbox and PlayStation 4, you're now developing for 7,000 different video cards in a billion different combinations. And it makes it impossible to know how your game is going to run on all these pieces of hardware. Now you are writing for one Stadia blade. And then maybe in 5 years, Google, or 2 years, Google upgrades the Stadia blade. So you're basically just getting more power, but the hardware spec is going to be the exact same because they're using some like hardware abstraction layer stuff. So you're basically writing for the Stadia hardware, and if they put faster GPUs, or if you want to merge multiple blades, your code really doesn't have to know that. It just, the background stuff will just kind of fire up when it needs to. And that's, as a developer, why they should be super excited, because they know how their game is going to run, and they know how it's going to run for every single person, whether they have really low internet, whether they have like fiber optics. I do think that there's going to be a large section of North America that is not going to be able to use this because they live out in rural areas where maybe they're using satellite internet. Satellite internet is not going to work with this just because of the latency for uploads. But if you live in or around a city and you have basic cable or DSL, you're going to be able to play these games. And that is a huge chunk of the populace.
Yeah, I think another reason why devs should be excited about this is that console generation transfer. You know, when we get from when we went from the PS3 to the PS4, a lot of developers, they look at the PS3 and it has this huge install base. Well, PS3 not so much, but it had a big install base, and they have to make a choice. Do we make our game for this huge install base, or do we make it for the PS4, which is more powerful and able to run it better and will make the game look better, but has a much smaller footprint right now, and it will get bigger over time? So what they end up doing is they try and make it for both. And we're approaching a new console generation probably next year or the year after, where the PS5 comes out. Yep. I'm sure it'll be announced next year. But when the PS5 comes out, we're going to have developers making that choice. I'm going to develop for the PS4. I also have to make sure that I include the PS4 Pro, and I want to also make sure that I'm supporting the PS5. So now that's 3 times the work that you're going to have to do, that you can instead just support everything on Stadia. Thank you, honey. Talking to my wife, not Lloyd. I think that That's another reason why devs should look at this and be like, oh, damn, this is going to save us so much money.
Totally. And they're not going to have to take any sort of shortcuts to get their game engine running on lower end systems. And they're also not going to have to take what their vision is and sort of cut it down because of the reality of supporting lower end hardware. They're going to be supporting one piece of hardware, or maybe two. They're going to support Google's streaming service and Microsoft's streaming service, and they're going to have two versions of their game potentially. But that is a lot less than what they have to do between PS3, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox One X, PS4 Pro, Xbox 2, whatever the next Xbox is going to be called, Switch, like all these other ones. They would just have to write for one or two platforms, potentially, if that's where they're focusing their efforts on game making. And with that hardware abstraction layer, they're basically writing their game that is going to run forever because it's running on the Stadia APIs. And if Stadia 2 comes out for Google, we won't even know as consumers. It's just going to be new hardware that they throw into all their server rooms across the globe. So as a developer, you don't really have to worry about that. You know your game is going to run until Google shuts down Stadia in the future.
That's definitely one of the things we have to worry about. We've got Google Buzz, Google Wave, Google Plus, Google Reader, Google whatever. Google gets bored fast. They get bored really, really fast, and they get really excited about something, and they say, "Well, it's not working out. Let's just junk it." Or I still don't understand why they killed Reader, because that was amazing and everybody used it.
100%.
But that's beside the point. So there's a lot of cool stuff that the devs can do, like running multiple GPUs. They can also, like, did you take a look at that art stuff that they did, where they did sketches and then they imported it on top of, they used the drawing to make the texture in the game in real time?
Yeah. So this one developer made a game engine that used machine learning, and because it's running on the cloud, it's running on really fast CPUs and the ability to merge multiple servers. They basically use machine learning to look at an image and create textures in real time based on that image. So they threw Starry Night, they threw Pac-Man, they threw all these other images at it, and that engine that they wrote was able to, using the machine learning, figure out how to make this work in their game engine. And this is stuff that developers will be able to do because all this stuff is running in the cloud. So they can have machine learning that is analyzing all the players that are playing the game to see if there's issues with their code. They can have all this stuff kind of running in the background, looking at all this stuff, and they don't have to worry about running their own servers, which is a huge cost. If you make a large multiplayer game, you're running your servers and you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on your servers. That's money you're not making back. You're never going to be getting more money from these players. And if all this stuff can just run in the cloud and it's part of your agreement with Google, I mean, that's going to be great for developers. And I just they showed off a couple demos and it was really cool. I just can't wait to see what they show off at E3, because that's when they're going to be making the big consumer splash, and they're going to show off all these crazy things that couldn't be done on any piece of hardware that you have in your house right now. And I'm excited to see what that stuff is.
I like that you brought up multiplayer, because that's something else that we need to talk about. They made a very bold claim, and it's a bold claim that is very important to me. Mm-hmm. And that is the fact that they said, on our platform, there won't be cheating or hacking.
Yep.
Now, I can understand why they would say that.
Yep.
But it brings to mind Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, where he says, it finds a way.
Yeah. Cheats find a way.
I don't know if people are going to find a way to do this, but because everything's running at Google's data center, people, I guess, can't really screw with it.
No.
And cheat.
No, I mean,
am I wrong?
No, everything is running in the cloud. You're getting a video feed. It's like you're watching a TV station, and the TV station is changing based on your inputs, whether it's on your keyboard and mouse, your controller, the Google controller, but you're not able to alter the code. You're not even able to touch the code. Maybe there'll be a way that people are putting like auto fire mock-ups or mods rather to their controller or whatever. But I mean, if it supports keyboard and mouse, you can just do that anyway, just by having like an auto repeater on your key or whatever. So I guess maybe input hacking might happen, but yeah, like all the code is running on a computer that no one has access to unless you are a Google engineer, and then you break into it that way. Of course, you're going to get fired. You won't be a Google engineer for very long just because you want to get a couple more kills in Fortnite. That's probably not the best career move that you can make. But yeah, like there is no code that is running on a hardware that you have in your hand or house, which is fantastic from a security standpoint because no one can touch that.
Yeah, definitely. You brought up the controller, so we might as well transfer. That's not the word. Translate. Segue. Yeah, there we go. We might as well segue over to the controller.
Sure.
First off, I want to say it's got the Konami code on it. I think that's awesome.
That
made me laugh.
It reminds me very much of Nintendo for the last couple generations, where they're putting messages on their circuit boards and things like that, where they're really just enjoying the gamer lifestyle and their part. They know what we know. That was surprising from Google because they're usually not a very consumer focused company. They're a ad focused company. So to have the Konami code made me think, hey, okay, maybe they do have a bunch of gamers working there that really know what's up.
Yeah, although Sundar Pichai came out on stage, the very first thing that he said, which is not the thing you want to say when you're about to unveil your new gaming platform, is, I don't really like video games. I mean, okay, then don't come talk to us. Have somebody else do it. But
right, yeah,
that's beside the point.
It's scary.
This is really cool. And, Lloyd and I were actually talking about this before they made their announcement. I was like, wow, they're not going to be able to use a Chromecast because it doesn't have the right Bluetooth. And they found a way around it. Their controller is a Wi-Fi controller.
Correct. And
it connects directly to your game on Google's servers. It doesn't connect to your Chromecast. It doesn't connect to your computer. Their controller just connect. It is an internet device, and you're playing over the internet. How freaking cool is that?
It's fantastic. Like when I was chatting with some friends earlier before this announcement, they're like, well, like the latency is always the big thing. That's what's come up. We've had PlayStation, PS Now for years, where you can play PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 games from your PC, from your PS4, from your Vita. But it's always been input lag. There's always been a little bit of a lag. And the reason why is because your controller connects to a piece of hardware. There's latency there. And then that hardware connects to the cloud. There's latency there. And then whatever you push up, it goes from your controller, latency, system, latency, server. Oh, he pushed up. Okay, let's send a video signal of you moving up. Well, this one, your controller's connecting to the server, your computer is connecting to the server to view the video feed. So it's getting rid of one of the points of latency that is in current setups. So maybe that's why Doom is playable on this, because you're not worrying about double the latency than you would with current solutions. I'm a little bit worried that maybe Wi-Fi is maybe not the best technology, because a lot of people have issues with Wi-Fi because of the number of Wi-Fi devices that are out there. If you live in an apartment block, everybody around you has a Wi-Fi base station, and they're getting in your spectrum, all up in your spectrum. So maybe there'll be some issues there. But Google, again, is smart. They make hardware, they make their phones. They know what they're doing, so they've probably figured this stuff out. But yeah, getting rid of the connection from the controller to the system to the cloud, and just having the controller to cloud and system to the cloud is a smart way to do it, and not something that I ever thought of before. So hopefully it works really well for them.
Yeah, and I have, we just got this a couple months ago. We got Google Wi-Fi.
Sure.
A friend of mine was talking about how much he loved it, and our house is kind of a long house, and like my wife has an office way at the far end, which is very far from where our router is. And she would always have trouble trying to watch something in her office while she's working out or sewing something. And we ended up getting the Google Wi-Fi, and we have had zero problems since.
Nice.
I feel like Google has a pretty good, they've got a good pin in what they're doing with Wi-Fi. So I'm pretty happy with that, and hopefully this little controller thing works. What did you think about the D-pad?
I think it looks okay. I'm glad that it has one. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really. I want to hold it in my hand because when there was mock-ups of this controller that went up a couple weeks ago, and to me it looked like an Ouya controller, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not going to be good. It looks a lot slicker. It looks more like a Pro controller from the Switch, which I love. So yeah, I don't know. I want to hold it in my hands to feel what it actually feels like. I think the rounded corners of that controller are going to make it a little bit odd for certain games, but I'm willing to give them a benefit of the doubt there.
Yeah, the D-pad for me, like that one looks real shaky. Like everything else so far that I've seen, that I've read, has me pretty plussed about this.
Sure.
But that D-pad, I don't like the look of it. That being said, before I got my hands on my PS4, whenever I saw that D-pad, I was always like, oh man, that D-pad looks like junk. It's going to be terrible. And then the first time I used it, I was like, wow, this is great. Yeah. So I'm ready to be proven wrong, but I think the D-pad on the Google controller or Stadia controller does not look good.
Yeah, the rounded edges. I mean, like I'm worried that my finger's going to slip off of it, but it looks like it's concave enough where your thumb's going to rest in the middle there and be able to push all the edges without any issue. But yeah, I mean it does. It's weird. It's I don't know, rounded D-pads. I've never really seen that before.
Yeah. Well, there's one more button there's other buttons on the controller, of course. And before we go any further, I just want to point out they put the A, B, X, Y buttons in the wrong spot. I just want to point that out. That's not where they go. They go the opposite.
Yeah,
but
true.
I digress.
True.
They also put a Google Assistant button on there.
Yeah.
And when I saw it, I was like, okay, so I can say, turn down the temperature in my house if I have the Google stuff, and which I don't. I have my house is all Amazon stuff. But then they showed something really cool where they were like playing a Tomb Raider game, and they were like, okay, how do I get past this spot? So all they have to do is hold down the Google Assistant button and say, Mr. Google Man, how do I get past this dungeon, or how do I solve this tomb? And it brought up a YouTube video of Lara Croft standing in exactly the same tomb and exactly the same point of the puzzle, because they know what you've done in the puzzle already. And they said, oh, just point your thing at this, throw the rope and pull it back. And then the player did that and they beat the puzzle. And like that was a huge light bulb over my head. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's the next step from games having web browsers where you'd go, oh, I want to know how to beat this. And you'd open up a web browser and go look at a game FAQ, and it's like, I know how to do it. Now it's like doing it for you. And it's also going to be really good. It's like you hold it down and it's like, okay, trigger phrase here. Tell Bill that I'm playing this game and I want him to play with me. And then you'll get some notification on your device and maybe you can join that way. Like it gives you that instant connection possibility, maybe sending messages or text messages or invites or something that way. And then, like you said, being able to control your home. Maybe if you have a bunch of smart lights in your house, it's like, oh, I'm getting kind of scared. Okay, Stadia device thing, turn up my lights to full because I'm scared a little bit.
Don't be scared. It's okay. One other thing I want to point out about the controller, Nintendo. This one has a headphone jack. What's your problem?
Yeah, it does. It does. And it kind of needs one. I guess it probably has a microphone built into it, I would think, since you can use the Google Assistant built in. But yeah, you'd want to be able to do your chat.
Yeah, it has a little hole on the underside, because when they showed that's when I saw the Konami code.
Right.
So it has a little hole on the bottom because that's where the microphone is. So it does have a built-in microphone.
Sure.
So then you just plug in your headphones and then you can talk to people. This is
And it's not going
It
through
really
your
is
PC.
taking away the friction.
100%.
I'm sorry, what?
It doesn't go through your PC either, or your Chromebook or your phone or your tablet. That voice is going directly to the server. So that's getting rid of another potential cause of latency, because your machine's waiting for the voice signal, and it's waiting for your controller signal, and it's doing some processing and then sending that to the server. It's going right through your Wi-Fi device directly to the cloud, to whatever game service you're running, which is going to be great, because it's probably going to be built into every single game, because it's going to be part of the service.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked about just about everything. I think that there was one more thing that I wanted to hit, but before we get there, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we missed so far, Lloyd?
I don't think so. I mean, I want to know, obviously everybody wants to know. I want to know more about how I'm going to be playing these games. But the fact that the ability to switch, like they showed off this demo where the guy started on a laptop and then he played on the laptop, and then he hit a button, and then he went to a tablet and hit a button, went to a phone, and then hit a button, went to a PC, picked up his controller, walked over to a TV. And the fact that your state for your game is stored in the cloud, it truly means that this service is platform agnostic. It doesn't matter what you're on. And that's really good, because I don't have a really good gaming laptop. I could be at work on my lunch break, and I could fire up into the best looking Fortnite game that I've ever seen, because it's running on a super powered processor in the cloud. I could play a couple games of Fortnite on my lunch, or I could pick up my phone and do that as well. It truly means that it doesn't matter what device you're using. And they really drove it home with just that little tiny demo. You can use any device that there's Stadia support for. So at launch, not every device, but hopefully in the future, it'll be pretty much every device. And all your game stuff is stored in the cloud. So you don't have to worry about save backups and porting profiles and all that junk. Your progress, your everything is in the cloud. So as long as you have a network access, you have access to your game and the game at the point that you left it.
Yeah. That's the thing that I was going to bring up. That was the one thing that we didn't talk about, is the fact that he went from device to device to device. And like, one of my favorite things about the Nintendo Switch, we have 3 docks in my house.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things is that I can grab my Switch, I can play it in my Nerd Nest, my recording studio. Mm-hmm. I can play it in there. I can grab it, go into the bedroom, plug it in, play on the TV in there. I can grab it, I can go downstairs, plug into the living room TV, which is the big one, the big TV that we have, and I can play it on there. And if I want, I can also play handheld. But being able to go from place to place with Stadia, that's just going to be fantastic. And I do think that, I think there's a lot of people that are like, well, Apple's never going to allow the Stadia app to run on their device. I think that Google just needs to update Chrome. Like, I think Chrome, like they keep saying it's through Chrome.
Yep.
I bet you that's how they're going to do it, is just by doing it through Chrome. Yep. Does that mean that Apple might say, okay, well, we're going to kick Chrome out of the store? God, I hope not, Apple. Don't be a dick.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it needs a web browser to receive a signal. So it doesn't necessarily even need to be Chrome, I would guess, provided you have a controller that is connected outside of your Apple device. So you could have your phone or your tablet mounted to some weird thing that is like on your desk or connected to your Google controller, and it just receives a video signal that way. If you want to do the more interactive stuff, you would definitely need Google Chrome. So you could do it from your laptop, your iMac or your MacBook, but they would have to come out with a specific Stadia app on the App Store to do some of that enhanced thing, because even Google Chrome that's on iOS isn't Google Chrome. It's Safari with a Google Chrome wrapper. Essentially, it's using Apple's
That's true. It's Chromium.
Yeah, it's WebKit. It's Apple's WebKit.
Or WebKit, right.
That has like Google stuff thrown over top of it. So there is no version of Chrome that runs natively on iOS. So they would have to have some sort of other app. But I mean, it's been done before. Netflix used to require a specific web browser, and then they came out with an app for iOS, and it's like, okay, I guess you don't need a specific web browser anymore. So that could come in the future. But yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see if Apple's is supported at launch, or if it's going to need some sort of Android device.
Yeah, well, I don't think Google's going to drop the ball on that. I think it's going to be Apple getting in the way. Like Valve recently made a Steam Link app so you could play games that are on your PC, on your phone, or on your iPad or whatever. And Apple said, nope, you're not going to do that. Yeah. And I think that's super lame.
It is.
But man, hey, first episode down. I think that went pretty well. Lloyd, thank you for joining me. He's my co-host. We're gonna do this every Sunday. Well, every other Sunday. Right now, we're gonna start out every 2 weeks, and depending on how fast the news starts coming from Google about Stadia, we'll either speed things up or slow things down. But we don't want to have an episode every week just to have an episode. So he and I are going to be recording this on Sunday mornings right now is what our plan is. Yep. We may end up live streaming our recordings. We haven't decided that yet. Honestly, he and I just decided yesterday that we were going to do this podcast together. So I think that I think that we're off to a good start.
I agree. I'm so excited about the show. I'm so excited about not just the Stadia, but what's going to happen at E3. But because Microsoft released a note to, I guess, shareholders and people that work at Microsoft saying it's really good for Google to start this, but we've been working on similar technology for a very long time, and we can't wait to show off what we got at E3. So it's going to be the battle of the online streaming gameplay services, and hopefully what it means is us as consumers wins because we get the best games wherever we are without having to buy new hardware. I'm really excited about E3 this year.
All right, so I guess I will say goodbye, and we will see you later.
All right, have a good one, everybody.